Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to start off again this week by looking at temperatures. This is the map looking at average temperature ranks by climate district since the middle of January, now through the 8th of February. And we've been having this discussion over the last 10 or so days about reorienting this temperature pattern. Of course, it's been split kind of right down the middle of the country with cold air anchored in the east and very mild air anchored in the west. And the discussion has been if this changes, if we see this warmth surging in this direction, we kick this colder out, we can develop troughs in the west and start to see an increased chance of bringing in precipitation into some extremely dry places in the country while reviving the west after what has been a very dry midwinter for the western United States. But just thinking about the temperatures, I wanted to show you this past weekend. We're beginning to see that transition, see more of the warmer air making its way into the midsection of the country. If we just look from the 5th through the 8th, all right, and compare it to every February 5th through the 8th, going all the way back to 1893, it was very mild comparatively. In fact, new record warm for just that stretch of days, all right? But the cold air that is anchored in the east has been, well, it's been anchored there. It's been the longest lasting in parts of the northeast. And they did see some bigger snows this past weekend, which have been aided with this colder air. But speaking of snow, we've been watching Great Lake effect snow. We've been watching Great Lake ice concentration. And we're trying to figure out kind of where the new snow swaths are going to be as the pattern reorients itself. But the Great Lakes ice concentration at 54.29% is well above the historic median for this time of year, compliments of all that colder air that's been there. But as many were getting ready to watch the Super Bowl, a lot of us meteorologists were just thinking through what the weekend pattern was doing. And we were watching satellite animations like this one. I particularly, when I was watching this yesterday, was just keeping an eye on how much of this area that had a lot of snow on it, from that, January 24th, 25th event, had eroded away as the mild air begins to come through. And I was watching it melt here as the temperatures got above freezing. But many of us, as we were looking at this, started to notice something interesting happening on Lake Erie. And I'm going to show you what we were all kind of fascinated by here. So I recorded it because I didn't think we'd have it saved this morning. But watch Lake Erie. All right, so this is sunrise yesterday. As we go forward, about mid-morning, a crack began to develop in the ice. Can you see it right in through there? And as I continued to play this through the rest of the day, that crack got larger and larger, and I had a sunset, which is coming through right at the end of this. This is a massive crack in the ice, and it was just fascinating to watch. If I just play it, you can also see the ice shifting here and here on as well. And just great. It's amazing just to kind of be able to see this. And I'll be honest with you, most of my career, we didn't have access to such incredibly high resolution satellite data like this just at our fingertips. The switch over in the GOES satellites to the super high resolution data. In fact, you can get an image every minute when they put it into rapid scan mode. It's just incredible. We didn't have it. We got it, in 2016 or 2017 was the first year that we saw this. So for many of us, we're still amazed by it. Okay, thinking all of that through, though, let's go back to our main slides here. And I wanted to see how much of this snow had been eroded away. So I did bring up the latest snowfall map. So we did see in the early part of the weekend more snow that came from Wisconsin through Indiana, some more lake effect here, got into this part of Ohio on Friday. We added up some great snow here. We need as much of this as we can over in parts of West Virginia on the Appalachian Mountains, given the drought scenario in this region. And then more added up in the Northeast, including some huge snows here, some places well over a foot in pockets of the coastal Northeast. But right now, our snow water equivalent map looks like this. Now, the hope was that melting some of the snow that was in this area, we were going to start to see some revival in soil moisture, but our concern there was that the soil was frozen. And right now, the latest 40 centimeter or 16-inch soil moisture percentile maps continue to look very much the same despite the snow melt, right? That was the discussion. But the good news is, back to where we started this, as we reorient the temperature pattern, the entirety of the West, including the mountains, which we've been discussing the lack of good snow, especially in parts of the Rockies, this is going to start to shift. And we're going to be bringing in some rain into this area, which will begin to change this map. So let's get in there and just see what's going on. The last 30 days have been bone dry west. So much of the Midwest, the Missouri, Ohio, Mississippi Valley have been very dry. Florida's been extremely dry. And we're watching pockets of the plains that have been some of the driest in terms of the month of January and early February on record. But this is the gap that's going to fill in first. When the pattern reorients, watch the west first. It will take on the brunt of the new systems, and we're going to watch them eject over the mountains and hope that they can develop as they move across the United States. So the place that I think is the driest compared to historical averages, when you look at a water year to date, so this includes fall, this is October 1st until now, you can see that so much of the Red River Valley, the Arkansas River Valley, getting into the southeast, we have some places that are between 6 and 10 inches off on total precipitation. Now out west, you say, we know California is still drought free. A lot of this was made possible because of that late December, early January setup. But throughout the Willamette Valley, getting into Northern California, extremely dry. And then you can see here in the Rockies how dry we are. So this is it. We watch this evolve. In the newest 15-day outlook, we are still stacked up here with a block that's in parts of the Pacific Ocean, but it is developing a downstream trough. And we can see it here with a ridge east. That's going to bring in the warmer air, but that's also going to reorient our jet to be doing this. As I've said, I would like to remove this blocking high over low setup that is on the downstream side of this into the northeast, getting out there, the Canadian Maritimes in the North Atlantic. But the pattern at least reoriented the temperature gradient, and that's going to give us a chance, okay? The newest WPC outlook, take note, this area that was, you saw just a moment ago, some places that were more than 9 inches below average, we're expecting a good 1 to 3 inch rainfall event here. Then you see out west, we're now beginning to add up precipitation into these very dry regions. Now, to be honest with you, when you look at a 7-day forecast and just see, generally a ½ inch to 1.5 inches, maybe some places over 2, that's not wet for this area. They can get so much more. And we're hoping that this pattern lasts at least 2 weeks to really revive this. But there's going to be some snow. I'm going to show you more detail on that in a moment. But there is a spot that is missing. And in this particular case, I'm concerned about that area. We just do not see the fill-in there. None of the models really do. And the storm track is going to take more of that moisture farther to the south and east than anywhere. But that's your latest WPC 1-week forecast. Okay, what about the next 2 weeks on the whole? You can see where the highs have gone. Like, look at this. See all the very, very dry conditions here? And then you get downstream, we start to pick this up again. Now, over the next 2 weeks, despite the wetter conditions coming in through here in the next week, week 2 tends to go a little drier across much of the south, the Gulf Coast, the Cotton Belt, the lower Mississippi Valley. And we're going to take a look at why that is, but at least we're finally looking at a map with some green on it here and through parts of the Midwest, upper Midwest. So let's kind of diagnose all of this. All right, currently this morning, just a hair after 6 a.m., we do have some wind issues that are coming out of the plains. Talk more about that in a second. We still have the cold weather advisories tucked into the northeast, the fog down south, and winter weather advisories beginning to show up in parts of the west, which is needed. Plus, we do have another clipper coming through here with some snow. Now, to show you all this, I've been working hard on getting on our new mapping system some of our other models in place. So this is now the high-res NAM. I've got it into the system. I can't wait to release this to you. I'm sorry, I don't want to send it out when it's not complete because it'll cause more problems than solving any problems. But take a look at these temperatures this morning in parts of New York. We're looking at single-digit to negative single-digit, very, very cold morning. And this, again, has been the last holdout for the colder conditions. But as you see this going through the day, we're looking at mid-afternoon today, temperatures surging into the 70s in the southern plains, central plains. Very, very mild conditions. And then as we get into the overnight tonight, and then tomorrow morning, tomorrow at midday, now there's some warm air that's finally trying to get its way farther and farther east. Now, I want to take you from there, and let's just go quickly look at those winds, because there was some concern about how strong these winds are going to be in the plains where the red flag warnings were. As I just play this out, that just gets you out there through, Tuesday, 6 a.m. Let's go ahead and play through the whole 60-hour time period. And we start to see coming out of Wyoming, really here into parts of the central U.S., wind gusts across Kansas, 40 to 50 miles an hour, according to the NAM. And we could extend these at times all the way here through the Ohio Valley. And there's some stronger winds up north as well. And there's going to be a lot more discussion about what's coming in the west here in just a moment. All right, let's now flip this over to precipitation type and intensity. So again, we're just color-coded here for rain, snow, and ice. And you can see why we have the winter weather advisories in Montana. Now, this is getting through 9 o'clock this morning. We're going to continue to play this through the mid-afternoon and evening. There's your snow coming through the UP, coming into parts of Ontario. And then we're going to watch as a low begins to take shape off the coast of California. And there's a frontal boundary. You saw it a moment ago, stretched right in through here. And there's a little shortwave in this area that's going to help out with some rainfall from parts of New Mexico over toward like El Paso through Lubbock and eventually getting right there near Norman. So we're going to need to get some precip out of this as this much deeper low comes into the west. Now you see some more light snow in the northeast out of this. In fact, let's go look at just how much snow we'll leave it on the NAM here, sorry. The NAM is going to be putting down. So let's get those frames loaded. There's the chance, oriented with the elevation here, of picking up another 5, 6 inches, 7 inches of snow, and plus a little bit of snow still coming in to parts of the Ohio Valley. But look, this is the beginning of finally reviving some good snowfall in the western states. Total precipitation, one last look at the NAM before we switch this over. This is total QPF, or quantitative precipitation forecast. All right, they're all loaded. There we go. So we can see we need the moisture in here. The first round is not a lot, but take a look at what's going on in the west. This is where the changes are going to be biggest. So to show you those changes, I'm going to now flip this over to the European model, which is the other model we have in this right now. We're getting all the others stacked up here in a moment. And I want to take you to jet stream level winds, because this is where our argument has been, right? We're trying to make the point that we're getting rid of these huge western ridges. And as I go forward, look at that. Deep trough by the time we get into Wednesday, Thursday, coming in the west. Ridge opens things up here. And then we sweep this one through. Look at that. This is the first piece. Nice little jet streak round in the base of the trough. That's system number 1 at the end of this week, getting into the weekend. And then we're all going to be watching this. Now that could be a pretty potent setup. There's an extended jet streak here. Flow comes into a trough in the west. The question is going to be, how does the model handle the low pressure on the nose of this jet at the surface? Because that could be critical for what happens into the northeast. All right, so we're gonna get through this. That's just your 10-day outlook on the jet stream. But look, it's different. You see it? And that's what the hope is. So let's now walk you back through this, but let's look specifically at precipitation type and intensity. All right, using the high-res European model, there we go. There's the snow into the northeast. There's your low here, and the low coming off California. When are we? This is Wednesday. Into Thursday, that one spreads more snow into the Rockies coming out of the Great Basin. We still have more snow into parts of the northeast in the front. Look at that front just settling right in through there. If we keep going, there we are. Like a little bit of snow in the Midwest as we work our way into Thursday, Friday. But this is when the first of the next 2 big potential systems comes out. Now watch Texas. This is the 13th into the 14th. Look at that. And we're going to watch 15th and 16th, how this system evolves into the northeast. Excuse me. And models over the weekend, we watched several model runs that dropped a much deeper low with much colder air. They took this high and just reoriented it. Excuse me, that's not a high, but the pressure was different here than it is now, and it had just sunk a whole lot of snow into this area. But the models are going to flip-flop on this many times, so nothing's even settled, out there 1 week from now toward this upcoming weekend into Monday. But there is a low coming through the northeast as another deep trough hits the west. And watch, this is the big extension of the jet. And we're going to see what could be a pretty potent system coming through. Now, that system, I'm talking about February 16th to the 18th, coming through the west and emerging like this. If this high pressure is in fact here, we will open up the Gulf, and this whole area will see probably some strong to severe storms, and we're going to see much more precipitation getting out in the models here. But it's different, and that's, I think, the point I want to make. Let's walk through a couple of other variables really quickly here. How about we do snowfall, just because we saw quite a bit of it out of this run. Let me zoom in here a little bit more so you can see better on the U.S. All right, here we go. Let's get it all in there. That's 15-day. All right, now remember, northeast, you're watching this system this weekend into Monday. This is going to change a lot. I have seen more consistent behavior in the models trying to take that last system and putting the majority of its snow here across the northern tier of the United States. But the western United States, I'm not going to use this for amounts, but I'm going to tell you, that is a good look for getting some snowfall into that region. I mean, we need this. We need this badly. I wish we were filling in more of this region, given how the Platte River system is so woefully short on snow right now. But some into the Rockies, bigger snows here, this is a good look. We've got better chances. My biggest issue with this whole pattern is who doesn't get it. We've talked so much about who's getting all the moisture. Let's go look at total QPF, or total precipitation. And I'm just going to give you the whole story here, because I go out 15 days, and man, there is a donut hole right in through here. Much better precipitation coming through this region, all right? But that whole leaves Nebraska just almost out of it. Same thing with Iowa. I got to head to Des Moines tomorrow. And, this is going to be the concern. When does this pattern, which seems to be revived in the West, fill this in? That we'll keep an eye on that, all right? Now, I keep mentioning this big system here in the Northeast. I do want to do a comparison between the GFS and the Euro. We're getting the GFS into that new system, so you'll be able to do like a split screen and see them both. I'm working on that code. But I do want you to note that this is Saturday, working our way into Sunday here. And if you look, the GFS is on the left and the Euro is on the right. Not only are the ensembles split on where this thing is going to go, but the models are as well. So just if you're in the Northeast watching this, you need to pay attention to it all week because it is a system coming across the country. It's just how much are we going to be delivering into the Northeast out of this system that I really want to assess. What I do see, though, is you get to the 15th, 16th, and 17th, both models are kicking off another deep West Coast cyclone. So there is some consistency there. But the dry spots here continue to concern me. Over the next week, who has the highest probability of staying under 1/10 of an inch? Well, it's here. And it's along the northern tier of the U.S. Remember, it's not till you get to that 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th storm system that we start to see better snows into this area. But over the next week, we're relatively dry in these spots. In fact, let's take this out to 10 days. See it erode? Okay, that's what we expected to happen with that next system coming through. But my goodness, we got a couple of areas here that just stay drier in this pattern, Florida included. All right, who's on the wetter side of it? Best chance at getting a full inch of liquid out of this. Yes, the West Coast and the mountains. And then take a look here. That dry spot I highlighted a moment ago, now picking up much needed moisture out of this pattern. Now, how long does the pattern last? Well, this is out there 10 days from now, and we still see some semblance of western trough, maybe some southeast ridging. And that's why most of the models are kind of giving off this wetter look from the west through the upper Midwest, Northeast. See it? But the reason for the dryness here, which we highlighted at the beginning in all the models, is because if we do end up having more ridging here, you're going to bring fast-moving fronts through. There'll be some strong and maybe even some severe storms, but it's not a soaker into week 2. Okay? But the revival of the moisture in the west is mission critical at this point. What about the temperatures? My goodness, look at the heat today in the midsection of the United States. That's Monday's high temperatures compared to average. Part of Nebraska hitting the mid-70s. That's Tuesday getting into Wednesday. Thursday, look at the heat down in the Red River Valley of the south. Also in the Red River Valley of the north, they're still quite warm here. Then we get into Friday and Saturday. And I noticed that the temperatures are dropping west, so a little bit of cooler air east. But this morning I pulled up, just using the AgWeather website, went to local weather. I went to Des Moines. I got to head there. I want to show you something. I apologize. I had this statistics box not working since the new year. I've been working on just rebuilding all of our APIs. And I got it up and going for you again, but look at that, 19 degrees warmer than average for the next 7 days. In fact, Des Moines is going to pick up 12 GDDs this week. Now, they don't matter, but they are, because we're going to do this. Look at that warm-up happening. Now, as we think beyond this, look at the temperature pattern in the models. So this warm-up does not seem to be permanent. We expect temperatures to drop. We need to get out there and see when and where that's going to happen. So let's go back to the European model and just kind of play it out. This is the next day. This would be the 9th, the 10th, 11th, 12th. As we get out there to the 13th, 14th, 15th. Now watch. There's the big warm-up on the 16th, 17th, and 18th ahead of that larger system we're expecting during that time frame, the one that digs deep into the west and ejects. But very mild in the Midwest, quite cold in the west, which they've not been for some time. And this is out here on the 19th and the 20th. And there's just some questions on the return of some colder air coming out of the Arctic once again as we get toward, the last week of February. Do the ensembles show it? Here's the next 5 days. That's day 5 through 10. Look at that reorientation of the temperature pattern. And day 10 through 15, this could be the storehouse of colder air that comes diving back into the United States once we get out there past, let's call it the 20th to the 24th, okay? Now, some of the models are showing that. If you look out here at the European model, this is a 1-week sliding window. So there's the mild air. We look at the week ending on the 21st, the cold that comes back into the west. But the European model has been aggressive as you finish the month of February to see this set back up again. Right? We've been familiar with that pattern. Mild here and Arctic there. Question will be, is this still a model artifact? Usually the European model in winter just has a cold bias in the west. All right, it's just what it does. So let's get you out there through the first full week of March, which is there, and see this coming back again. We have to understand if that's really in the forecast or if it's just an artifact of persistence with the model. I do want to point out that just the analogs that we're stuck on right now, the 18, 14, and 09, the February to March time period, we tended to have access to that cold air. You've seen this now dozens of times from Matt and I. But we also tend to wake this corridor up with wetter conditions and also keep the northwest wetter while the southern plains are drier, so is the southeast. So let's see if the model's picking up on that as well. We'll leave it on the European first. We'll do a 30-day outlook through the beginning of March. Let's go out to March 15th. Here we go. And yeah, it's a little drier here. All right, wetter into this area, wetter in the northwest. So the models are lining up with the analogs relatively well. All right. It does help that the MJO transition now getting into phase 3 and 4 historically tries to drop, troughs of cold air in through here, which would invigorate this area with wetter conditions and same here, but also have access to colder conditions. So we understand that the model's being consistent with itself when it's projecting this precipitation pattern, knowing that it's also forecasting the MJO to go to phase 3 and phase 4. But what about beyond that? Well, we saw last week that the newest outlook for March, April, and May tended to do a couple of things. Keep this area drier, the southeast drier, and in the middle very wet and running over the top of this very wet. All right. So that March, April, May outlook, we're just curious if there's any sort of trend to it. How related is it to what's going on with El Nino transition? And what do some of the other models say? So let's do that. We'll talk South America and wrap this one up. I showed you this last week. We are now seeing the European model very aggressively predicting El Nino conditions, possibly strong El Nino. The newest NMME, the National Multi-Model Ensemble, has a very similar outlook. You can see we're coming out of the basement. Most of the ensemble members by late spring into summer are now up here at a pretty healthy El Nino. Some of them, just like the European, are at strong. And the new European model forecast for March, April, May also does this. Wetter here, drier there, near normal. See, that's a very consistent. You can see it's very similar to what the European is suggesting, at least in the pattern. Now, I was curious about one thing, because I've now watched, we did this on Friday. We saw the European model trend for the last 4 runs, just keeping this area wetter and this area drier. And so I went out and I said, well, is this just a part of a longer term pattern for March to May? So I decided to use the last 20 years. And we're using all of them, all 20 years. We're just making a composite map. And sure enough, if you look at it, this whole region, I should have extended that a bit farther, is wetter. We see a little bit wetter conditions here, and we're drier there, drier in the southeast, maybe a little drier in the mid-Atlantic. Now, that doesn't mean that every single March to May has looked like this, but we're just trying to shove them all together and see if there's any sort of consistency here. And that seems to be something we've seen a whole lot more. So if I come down here to the lower Mississippi River Valley, I can just go through and say, well, show me the trend March to May in the lower Mississippi River Valley precipitation. And I went all the way back to 1980. So I was just curious. Now, please understand, there is just a lot of volatility. But when you detrend this, just using a linear trend line, all right, it's up. And it honestly up about 2 inches on average. Now, you can do this for any location you want. I'll link this page for you so you have access to it. It's called Climate at a Glance. You can make these graphics anywhere. So let's do this. We saw that the hard red winter wheat belt, here we go, winter wheat belt let's use this one. Had a bit of a dry bias to it. And, I went back to 1895. Sorry, let's just go to 1980 on the trend line. That's what we're going to do here. And plot this again. Now, interestingly enough, okay, from 1980, there is actually an upward trend of about 0.16. But what I want to know is, does that wheat belt, in fact, let's change the area. That may include more than just what I'm looking for, which is kind of the central plains. So you can come up here and pick different areas. How about we do southern, sorry, I should have been more organized here for you. Let's just do the Great Plains. All right, let's plot that. It went back to 1895. Let's flip that back to 1980 real quick, since that's the time period we're doing this over. And again, yeah, even in that area, look, there is still a slight upward trend. So that makes me wonder, okay, is the model trying to sniff out something here with respect to the pattern and the eventual evolution of El Nino. I got to think more about this. I'll talk with Matt about it today, and we're going to come back to you with some just different ideas. There you go. Just wanted to show you that. Again, you can find the link to this. I'll put it in the comments section below so you have access to it, okay? All right, we're going to finish up with South America. Let's shrink this up so you can see it. The last 7 days did bring in needed rains into this area and here off the mountains. And how much is this? Just so you know, 25 millimeters is an inch, 50 is 2, 10 is about a half an inch. So we did get some storms reviving some of the moisture there. We also watched going into the weekend, this is now February 8th into the 9th, more storm complexes moving through. And this is starting to put a kind of an end to the drought issues that we've been dealing with down here, which we've watched over the last 30 plus days. The forecast models over the next 2 weeks remain wet in this part of Argentina. So that's now been a full week worth of trend seeing that occur there. All right. And if you come up to Mato Grosso, near normal precipitation, maybe a slight wet bias in the center part of Mato Grosso, we know that they are well above average on their soybean harvest pace based on the data they released on Friday. But the safrinha corn is going in a bit late. It's about 7 or 8% behind the 5-year average here, but ahead of a year ago. All right. Just bigger picture as we wrap all of this up. All right. We've talked about South America, North America. Look at Europe. With the troughs that are developing across the North Atlantic, we are hitting Western Europe with a lot of precipitation. Of course, we're all watching the Olympics right now going on in Italy. It could be wetter than average there. Don't miss this, though. Australia, a huge tropical surge of moisture coming through here out of the north. That's what happens when you get the MJO into phase 3. And we're going to help moisture into this area, which is going to hit some dry pockets. But in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, right into here, we've been watching drought develop all summer long. Plus, they've had multiple heat waves. There's a tropical event coming through Western Australia. And if you're just thinking about where ag is, we've got to lop off that area. That's where the heaviest ag is in Western Australia. A lot of the rest of this is just outback and interior. But temperature-wise, I mean, look, mild finally. And that, I think, is key going forward. So that's your 10-day outlook from the European model on temperature anomalies, again, compared to normal. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. Hey, be safe this week. We'll talk again on Wednesday. Matt will pick it up tomorrow morning. Have a good one. Thanks.